Hey guys, Adam here with AmericanTrucks.com, and today we're taking a closer look at and installing the HD replacement front bumper available for the 2014 to 2018 Silverado 1500s. You should be checking out this particular front bumper for your Silverado if you're looking for all-out front end protection, completely replacing your front bumper with the addition of what would be considered a full brush guard as well. This is a fully welded one-piece design, diamond-plated steel, heavy-duty steel construction throughout, hand-welded, extremely durable and extremely tough. This thing's built to handle on and off-road obstacles and the work site if you're using your truck to its fullest potential. If you come in contact with any obstacles, this thing is absolutely going to be giving the damage and not taking it. It is that tough. With that said, it is also extremely heavy, so when you do get to installing this thing, make sure you have a couple of friends on deck to help you get this in place. Jack stands also do the trick, but I'll get to that in just 1 second. A couple of cool things I want to point out about this particular bumper. With it being full width, you have really superior headlight protection. This is a lot more protective than some of the other options on the market. Not only does it cover the headlights, it goes a little bit further past to protect some of that fender, and it has 3 bars, tubular steel bars, that are going to give superior protection as well. Same thing goes on the opposite end. You also have a built-in punch plate protecting your grille, giving you that extra protection with support bars going throughout, which again, not other ones on the market will offer. It also gives you some front-end towing opportunities with a welded-on hitch receiver. You do get to retain your factory tow hooks for some recovery, and you do have a bar at the bottom. Now, there are no pre-drilled holes for auxiliary lighting opportunities, but you could make some modifications. You could, of course, drill into this bar here, drill into the bottom piece there. If you did want to mount a light bar or fog lights, spotlights, whatever fits your preference. So holes aren't pre-drilled, but you could, of course, make the modifications if you wanted to. With that said, this does go through a 2-stage powder coating process. It's an e-coating and then a powder coating to give it that semi-gloss finish and that corrosion and rust resistance. And being black, it does give you a nice stealthy appearance to the front end. So with the functionality aspect of protection, it does give you a nice exterior appearance change too, making it look like your truck is ready for off-road or work site usage. All of that in mind, this whole thing is coming in right around $950, which puts it right in the middle of the category as far as price-wise goes. Now, there are some front bumpers that are not a full wraparound design, that don't have that brush guard welded together, but just have that bumper piece, that are less expensive. But there are other options out there with more bells and whistles that have light bars included and pre-installed and all of that good stuff. That does jack the price up more. So this one falls right in the middle. Now, as far as the install is concerned, I already let you know that you should have a couple of friends on deck. This thing is absolutely heavy. You can't do it by yourself. That's just how it's gonna be. Now, as far as fitment, I will say it does have a little bit of a bumper gap between the bumper and the body of the vehicle. Because it is hand welded and it's aftermarket armor, don't expect perfect OEM fitment. This particular option does end up having a little bit of a gap. Some guys might not mind it, some guys might mind it, but full disclosure there. It was a little tricky getting those fog lights in place, but I will show you guys that whole process from start to finish. That's why I bump it up from bordering 2 out of 3 to 3 out of 3, because it does get tricky at times with getting it lined up and because it's so heavy. With all that said, allow yourself 3, maybe 4 hours from start to finish, depending on your personal experience and how much help you have on deck. Simple hand tools will do the trick, and I'm going to show you guys from start to finish the whole process, so why don't we just get started. The tools used in this install include an impact gun, 3/8 ratchet, 1/2-inch ratchet, variety of extensions, 7mm, 10, 13, 15, 16, 18, 19mm deep sockets, 19mm swivel socket, 10, 13, 16, 18, and 19mm wrenches, flathead and Phillips head screwdrivers, needle nose pliers, and a panel removal tool. Now, the first step of the uninstall is to grab your panel removal tool, or a flathead screwdriver does the trick if you don't have one of these handy. Remove all of the plastic rivets or the push pin clips holding on that factory radiator shroud on top to give you access to your upper grille bolts. There's 12 of them all around the edges. Grab that tool, pry up, and remove them. Once you get this last one off, you can pop the entire radiator shroud out in one piece. Next step are the 4 10mm bolts at the top of our grille. Now those were given access to by removing the radiator shroud. That's why we had to pop that off. So grab your 10mm socket and remove all 4 of these. So the next step here is to crawl underneath the front end. There's 2 10mm bolts holding on the bottom of your upper grille, as well as 2 more clips that are snapping it into place. We're gonna pop off those 10mm bolts, and then we'll be able to pull our grille off. Next up, we have to remove our trim panel underneath our headlights. Grab a 7mm socket and remove the 1 bolt in your wheel well. Repeat for the other side. With those bolts out of place, the next step here is to pull off that lower trim panel to gain access to a couple of bolts underneath of that lower grille. So with that, pull them off from the side, work your way all the way around, pop that right off, set it aside. The next couple of bolts you want to remove are right where the grille meets that headlight, underneath of that grille portion. Grab your 10mm socket and your extension, and you're going to get this off. Same thing on the other side. All right, now we can get our upper grille out of place. Next up, there are 2 bolts, one on each side underneath of your bumper on a crossbar, like a support crossbar. Grab a 13mm socket and remove those bolts. All right, now we can do the same thing on the other side. There are 4 bolts holding the front of the bumper in place. Grab an 18 socket and get these off. So once you have everything disconnected from your stock bumper, it's time to pull it off. Next, we have to remove our tow hooks. Before we get that far, we're going to take off that face plate. There are 3 bolts on the front of it. Grab your 15mm socket and pop these off. Same thing on the other side, and then we'll tackle removing our tow hooks. All right, next up is your tow hooks. Grab an 18 socket and remove the solo bolt on the one side. The secondary bolt has a nut on the opposite end, so grab an 18 wrench, hold on to that. Set this aside to be reinstalled later. Now that we have our factory bumper on our table, we're going to start disassembling our fog light brackets. Now, as you can see, it's a part of this bigger exoskeleton, but we don't have to take the whole thing off, just the brackets surrounding our fog light to pop this out of place. Before we actually do that, we want to pull off our harness clips, keeping this on that bracket. Just pull those straight back and they'll come out. Now, because we're transferring over the fog lights, we're going to have to transfer over the entire harness from the back of the factory bumper over to the Steelcraft one. But for now, we're just gonna take that off of the bracket we're removing. Grab a 15mm socket and an impact gun or a ratchet and pop these bolts off. All right, now we can start on the opposite end, pulling off that harness and then unbolting that bracket. All right, now that we have the fog lights out of place, we're gonna feed this harness through and remove that from the bumper. I'm gonna start by pulling off all of these clips. Now to get these push pin clips that are holding it on the inside of this bracket, a panel removal tool will definitely help. All right, now we can get the entire bumper off the table, bring those fog lights back on to start disassembling that. All right, now the next step here is to take your bare factory fog light and slide it into place underneath of the 3 brackets. As you can see, those holes line up with the holes on your fog light, so that's where we're gonna be bolting this down or screwing it down with those factory screws. Now, in order to get this into place, you might have to struggle with it for a little bit, but you will end up getting this to snap into place here. Now push this straight through the back. If you need help, you can use a mallet to just lightly tap this into place. We got this into place. We can take those factory screws with those factory plungers, push them right in through the top, start tightening those down. Grab your Phillips head screwdriver and you can secure that fog light into place. Once you start getting that nice and snug, you can repeat this exact process for the opposite side. Quick disclaimer before we move forward, if you find that these 3 factory screws with the factory plastic clips aren't fully tightening and securing your fog lights into place like you'd want it to be permanently, it's a good idea to pick up some additional hardware from your local hardware store or auto parts store just to get screws that'll fit the factory fog lights and also tighten this down properly and securely if you find that your factory screws aren't doing the trick. As you can see, ours are pretty snug right now, so we're gonna move forward and set our factory harness into place on the back of this bumper. All right, from here, we're gonna lay that factory harness right into the middle. As you remember, we removed this from our factory bumper with these Christmas tree clips. This bumper does not have them. So we're not gonna be able to secure this down until the bumper is fully installed on our truck. We'll then zip tie it back to the factory harness on the truck. But for now, we could feed our harness over to our fog lights and plug in those connectors to the back of the bulbs. Again, we'll secure that harness down once this is installed. Head over to the other one, plug in that connector. All right, at this point, there are open holes on the back of your bumper for your factory parking sensors. If your truck does not have parking sensors, you're given these rubber plugs to plug up these holes. So again, this is all up to you when you want to install these. You don't have to do it now, but I find it easier to just plug these up since our Silverado did not come with factory sensors. Just pop those into place, they sit flush. Now, if your truck did come with sensors, you can install these into the back of the bumper now. You can do it while it's on the truck, whatever fits your personal preference, whenever you find it to be convenient. We've also got one on each side by our fog lights. Now, before we get this on the truck, I want to take a closer look at this, comparing this one to our stock bumper, so let's get that in place. Now that we have our factory bumper off of our truck, we have a few things transferred over to our new bumper. It's time to compare and contrast the two. If you were to take your truck off-roading, if you're using it to its fullest potential, even if you're just at the work site or going on a family vacation, your factory front end is a lot more susceptible to damage. This thing is meant to take a beating, it looks badass, and the materials here are just gonna speak for themselves. This whole thing is a fully welded, full width, one-piece bumper. and those full welds are going to give it that extra strength that it needs when comparing that to some of the three-piece options out there. One thing I like about this is it's not only that front bumper, but it's got that brush guard combo with it. That gives you full upper and lower protection. This is all diamond steel plating. That steel plating is welded to this tubular design on the front to give you extra protection, making it a really heavy but very durable bumper. It's got full width design for those headlights, giving you those tri-bar designs. You've got designs covering up that front grille with the honeycomb finish. You actually have a tow hitch or tow hitch receiver for your front end welded to the bumper. That's a good feature to add here about the Steelcraft bumper. You are going to be able to retain your factory tow hooks. If you don't have factory tow hooks, you could pick them up separately and install those onto your frame, because you will be uninstalling some of those things from your factory frame, as you saw earlier. With all of that in mind, not features you would see on your factory bumper. This factory bumper does have the tow hook cutouts, no receiver on the front end. It's really basic looking. We don't have the color matched bumpers you would get on the LTZ packages. This is all just chrome, it's bland, it's gonna get dented, beat up, rusty. You can see it's all scratched up. Not something you'd expect here from that two-stage gloss black powder coating. With all of that in mind, I still wanna show you guys how this gets mounted up, so let's get this onto our truck. Next up here, we're actually back at the truck. We're gonna be installing our left and right side support brackets to our factory frame. Now the left side bracket you'll see has this swivel. That's gonna go just like this on the side where our factory tow hooks were mounted up. And we have that double nut bolt plate. We're gonna take off our nylon lock nuts. We're gonna use spacers as well. You're gonna put the double bolt plate with the longer piece on the inside, going straight through just like this, and that will hold up our support bracket. On the opposite end, we're gonna use our washers and our lock nuts. Grab your 19mm socket and tighten those down. On the other side, we're going to use the single bolt plate. That's going to go on the inside. We're going to use the outer support bracket. Next up, we're going to install our frame bracket. Now this is going to reuse those factory bolts in order to tighten it down to the plate where our factory plates were, right above our tow hooks. I'm just going to tighten this one down by hand to get this in place. One of them is going to go on the outside and the other on the inside. Now there are bolts included in the kit to help you bolt this down to the support brackets that we just installed. So grab those along with the flat washers and nuts and tighten them down. Same thing on this side. All right, next up here is our tow hook. Now our factory tow hook is going to reuse that factory hardware. The long bolt's going to go all the way through just like that. I'm going to put the nut on it as well, tighten that down. Grab your 18mm wrench as well as your 18mm socket, and tighten it down. You want to make sure you're holding the tow hook in approximately the position that you'll want. Now the other bolt's going to go on this side. We're going to tighten this down by hand. As you can see, it starts to lock down that tow hook. Grab your socket and tighten it down. Repeat this whole process for this bracket and the tow hook on the other side. All right, the next step is to assemble our grille. Now the reason we want to do this now and not after the bumper installation is because we won't be able to gain access to the bolts that go underneath if the bumper was in place. So for here, we're going to pop this into place, install the 4 10mm bolts across the top, then the 4 across the bottom, and then we'll put our headlight and grille trim back in place above where the bumper would go. Next up is our trim piece. Grab those 7mm factory bolts and tighten it down in the wheel well. All right, repeat for the other side. So it's about time to get your bumper onto your Silverado, and before you do so, guys, have 2 jack stands handy just to support that weight, but I also got my buddy Joe and my buddy Travis out of the frame here. They're gonna help me get this bumper into place. It is extremely heavy when you're trying to bolt this up. You cannot do it by yourself. Have a helping hand, at least one friend, if not 2, to hold this up while you work the ratchet. But Joe, you ready?
Ready.
Let's do it. Now you want to grab a 19 socket and an 18 wrench, hand underneath with the hardware, tighten things down. All right, the next step here is to plug in our factory fog light harness. Now, that has the receiver harness already installed right above the factory skid plate. Those connect together. And then, as you remember, this was held on by Christmas tree clips on the back of the factory bumper. Since we don't have a spot for those on the new bumper, there are zip ties provided for you. You can use those zip ties to just secure this back to the factory harness above that skid plate. It'll be up and out of the way. Just make sure it's away from anything moving and anything that gets really, really hot. I like to go right above that skid plate and just zip tie it back. All right, and do the same thing on the other side. The last step of the entire process here is that factory radiator shroud. We're gonna lay that back over top, and you remember taking those push pin rivets off, those plastic rivets. We're just gonna pop those. All right, shut your hood and you're good to go. Well guys, that's gonna wrap up my review and install of this HD replacement front bumper for the 14 to 18 Silverado 1500. This is a good way to go. You can get yours right here at AmericanTrucks.com.